Welcome to the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm here with Taylor Halverson in our Entrepreneurship program, and we are talking about entrepreneurship and supporting students. So Taylor, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, great to see everybody. So I've been teaching entrepreneurship for about 4 years. I've been an entrepreneur for much longer than that. And we have some phenomenal programs and opportunities here at BYU in terms of the personnel, resources, the Rollins Center, faculty members, tech transfer office. BYU is just in a phenomenal place here in the heart of what's called Silicon Slopes. And one of my great joys is helping to empower students with tools and processes to find problems, discover who needs to have those solved, and people who want to pay for the solution, students or others who can bring those solutions to bear.
And you've come an interesting route together. You've had a couple different roles on BYU campus. You're a PhD, and do you want to talk about kind of interesting aspect to your background just a little bit?
Well, I'm a lifelong learner, and I did do actually two PhDs. I can't even count.
Yeah, no worries.
They were one in humanities, one in education, and I found myself wanting more than what was available in a PhD program. I wanted to do more than simply research. I wanted to help people empower like the next generation to take action and make the world a better place.
For sure.
My humanities PhD, I'd studied all the great people in the past. I'm like, well, okay, that's interesting. All these people made these amazing things happen. Well, what am I going to do to make the future better?
Yep.
So I did spend some time, about 11 years. This is where we first met.
Right.
I used to train professors how to be teachers. That was the first job I had at Brigham Young University. And that was really amazing because I get to hang out with guys like you all day. And I get like mini TED Talks from people about their area of expertise.
Yep.
And then I share with them some tools about how to be a better learning designer and a better teacher.
And that was the Center of Teaching and Learning. So you weren't just teaching them, you guys were creating software tools for them as well.
That is correct. We had like a consulting arm, and then like a group that would build tools that would support faculty members.
Yeah.
And our offices were just like kind of across the hallway from one another. So yeah.
And we've commercialized some of those tools. Like they're great software things that have come out of there. So
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So, and I should also say, like, fair to say, you're kind of just curious about the world. Like you travel a lot, you're involved in a lot of things.
Yeah.
What's your favorite place you've been?
Well, it's actually wherever I'm at the moment.
Okay.
So I've traveled the world, led tour groups all over the world, and it's as hard. It's like, who's your favorite child?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, well, whoever's being nice to me that I'm with right now. So I recently was in Colombia with my family in Costa Rica. And I'd say Colombia was really unexpected. I'm a child of the 80s, and we kind of thought that
I've never been.
Was like drug lord ridden kind of place. And it was just delightful. The people were so welcoming. And I was shocked. Like I actually am an expert in world history and world civilizations. And I was shocked that the city we were staying in, Cartagena, was like essentially the epicenter, the administrative epicenter for Spain in the New World. And most of the gold and silver that was extracted from South America flowed right through the city into the old world. I'm like, how in the world did I never learn about this?
Yeah.
Another trip my family did 3 weeks in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
And I'd never been before. I'm like, well, if I'm going to travel, I'm going to go somewhere exotic. Why would I just go to a nicer version of the United States? And we loved it. It was incredible. But probably one of the highlights was over Christmas a year ago, we went to New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
So it was summertime. I'm a Minnesota boy, so I had enough winter to last a lifetime.
No doubt.
So to be able to travel for 3 weeks in like December and January when it's cold, like here in Utah, and have like summer weather, and it was absolutely delightful. It was a Lord of the Rings pilgrimage. So my family, we all up.
You went to the site, you saw The Hobbit.
We went and saw. Yep, we went to a lot of the filming locations. It was a really amazing experience.
Anyway, well, good. Well, that sounds fantastic. So I just want people to know that you're interested in all kinds of things. You do interesting things, Taylor.
Yeah, that's like hanging out with you because it's always like. And I will point out that Dave Brown was one of the guys who really got me into travel. He told me about some really cool trips he'd done in the Southwest, and I had just kind of moved to Utah. And I'm like, I'm going to do that. So that ended up resulting in about 60 different road trips over 8 years with my family and all over the Western United States. We live in an amazing place.
Including an epic trip to check out NASCAR. So
that was actually a lot of fun. We're probably too young for it.
It was very loud. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Well, good. Well, thanks. So so now you're here at working with the Rollins Center. You're a professor of entrepreneurship. Tell us about your role and how you interact with students in that role.
So primarily my job is to be interfacing directly with students, teaching classes. We have a whole range of classes. I do most of many intro courses, but we have much more in-depth classes for those who are further along in their journey. Mm-hmm. I also help manage our mentoring program. We have incredible entrepreneurs in the community who want to give back to students.
That's true.
And so they're willing to give their time and expertise to guide students through the process.
If someone's listening right now and they're like, hey, I'm one of those people, I'd like to be involved, what would they do? Like, how can I get involved?
Reach out to me, taylor.halverson@byu.edu, and I can get you connected. Again, there are hundreds and hundreds of students across campus who are involved in innovation entrepreneurial ventures. And they have a benefit from somebody who's been down the road a little bit farther who can give them some guidance.
And if you're the person who's been down the road a little further, they're super fun to engage with.
Yeah.
Like, these are excited people who are, eager to build something, learn new things.
You've nailed it. In fact, I tell students, some students are a little worried about reaching out to a mentor. I don't want to bother them. I'm like, make their day.
Yeah.
People, when they've made a little progress in life, find enormous joy in giving back to the next generation. And like, give them meaning, like create meaning for people by saying, I would love for you to give me just a bit of mentoring. It doesn't have to be a lot. You can just say, can we go to lunch, talk on the phone for 15 or 20 minutes? There's lots of ways to receive mentoring. It doesn't have to be there's at your side 24/7 for 6 months straight. It could just be, we talk for 30 minutes once a month.
And some of these students that you and I talk to about business, either licensing for tech transfer or just doing a startup, generally, some of these will go on and launch multi-billion-dollar companies. Mm-hmm. We know that, like, just look at the past. That definitely will happen.
Yeah.
And so if you can give them a little nudge in the right direction, it's super satisfying, right?
That's exactly right. And you have made a note to yourself about the validation grants. This is related. So the Millers, the Miller Family Foundation,
Larry H. Miller, right?
Larry H. Miller, they've been very generous to many organizations. And
Gail Miller, I should say.
Gail Miller and Gail and Kim Miller. So they're one of the organizations. They have donated. We're one of the organizations that have received donations from them. And from an endowment they gave, there's a certain amount of interest that kicks out every year. And our role is to use that money to support the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so we have a variety of grants. They're reimbursement grants where if you're going to, for entrepreneurial experimentation and validation, the idea is you might have a hypothesis that there's a particular customer segment who has this particular pain point, and you want to go run some tests to verify whether you're right or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes money will help. And so if you go run the experiment, if you've gotten authorization to get the validation grant, you can run those experiments and then get up to $500 reimbursement for the validation grant. We have traction grants for $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, up to $27,000. So if you're continuing to make some significant progress in your business, there's really good money that have come from the Millers and others to contribute.
So it sounds like a student validation would be, I have no idea if this is going to work.
Right.
So you get up to $500, and then maybe you send out a survey to a target organization, see what they have to say. And then if the results are good, now that sounds like traction, and maybe we go a little further. What would come next?
The traction grant. There's just 3 or 4 stages in the traction grant.
And with traction, what do you expect them to do at that point if they get that?
They really, at this point, have to have a clear sense of their target market. And we call it traction. They've already started to get sufficient amount of interest that people are willing to pay for a solution that the entrepreneur is developing or has access to.
Yeah. And I talk to students who come and talk to you and get grants in many cases. Sometimes they don't. Like, sometimes the idea is not fully baked or whatever. But student entrepreneurs, like, you definitely should do this. Why would you not do this? Like, Taylor's phone should be ringing off the hook.
Well, it is.
Is it?
Like, I usually respond to any application comes in. I've usually got a response within about 24 hours.
On this.
And last year alone, we awarded, just on the validation grant. Now, traction grant is separate, and they actually have a bigger budget than I do. And I'm not involved with that committee. Okay. I know the people who are, but I alone awarded $100,000 in $500 installments. So basically 200 grants were given out last year.
Okay.
And I should have checked the numbers before you came over, but we're on track to do more than that this year. So the interest here, why we're focusing on this is that being an entrepreneur is, some people think, it's about taking a lot of risk. Actually, it's the exact opposite. The best entrepreneurs are de-risking through appropriate experimentation.
Yeah.
And sometimes a little bit of cash can help you run an experiment to help you realize this is not an idea to pursue, or this is a wrong target market. And the last thing you want to do in your life is to spend more time or money or resources on a bad idea or something that's not the right customer at the right time. And this, we feel like instead of just helping one team with $50,000, we're like, let's help 100 teams with, a little bit of money so they can, we're basically placing way more bets.
Yeah. And I've seen it work, and it's so smart. And it's totally right. Most students will have at most a 4-year window to launch a company while they're a student. It's an ideal time to launch a company. It's the lowest risk you're going to have. But why spend that time on something that won't work? Get a validation grant and figure it out first. So making sure you've got the right idea is important for students. What other challenges do you see student entrepreneurs having?
Sometimes not understanding the structure of what it really means to be a disciplined entrepreneur. We teach them in the entrepreneurship program, essentially the scientific method for applied to entrepreneurship. The idea is you have an assumption that there is a pain that needs to be solved out there. Well, okay, turn that into a scientific hypothesis and run a test that gathers data to prove whether you're right or wrong. If you're right, run the next test on the next hypothesis. And if you confirm enough of your assumptions that you're right, you have a business. So it's all about de-risking things. And the entrepreneurship program, in conjunction with the Center for Entrepreneurship, the Rollins Center for Entrepreneurship, has just dozens of people who are stand ready to be supportive. We have the curriculum, resources. And what's also really helpful, if you find yourself like, I really want to be involved in building a business, the entrepreneurship program can give you credit for that. We have a variety of courses that give you the process, the guidance, the feedback, and the time to go build.
Yeah.
So yes, we have lots of assignments, but at the same time, some of the assignments are go take the next step in your business and report on what happened. So think about, instead of going to some other class somewhere on campus where you're told by the professor what to do all the time, here it's like you're self-directing, say, here's the next step in my business, and we provide feedback as you perform and you get credit for it. That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, BYU has one of the best entrepreneurship programs in the country, and you can see why. And one thing that some people will be aware of is the Sandbox program, which is kind of the elite version of what you just described, where it's a year-long course. You have to apply to be in it. It's competitive.
17 credits.
Yeah, if your team gets in it, it's 17 credits, and you're spending all that time building your business. We've had some great businesses come out of it. When you think about, it doesn't have to be Sandbox, but when you think of successful student entrepreneurship group, who do you think of? Like, what's a good company that's come out of this?
Well, it's funny, a trick question, because there are companies that any of us could identify, particularly in Silicon Slopes.
Yeah.
And it's really heartwarming to see the tremendous success we've had. But because there's many forms of successful entrepreneurship, we're trying really hard to help students know that there are many ways to succeed beyond just building a $1 billion tech business. Many students are what are called lifestyle businesses, where they run a business, they are the boss, but they make enough to be able to take care of their needs and take care of a family, but you're not going to see their business like hitting the front page. It's like a $1 billion valuation. There's also another approach to entrepreneurship that's become much more, people become more aware of it recently, called entrepreneurship through acquisition.
Yeah.
And what you guys are doing is not quite like that, but it's in something that's connected.
Yeah.
And the idea is like, to be a successful entrepreneur, the more you can de-risk your action by getting the data in advance, the more likely you are to succeed. So there's a couple of approaches. One is, if there's an existing business out there, maybe it's a heating, ventilation, air conditioning company. It's been in business for 40 years, and the owner's like, I want to retire. And you come in and say, look, I can buy your business for 3 times what you're making in a year, and we'll pay you off in installments. And then you get to be the owner and collect the money and call the shots. Yes. Or you go to the transfer office and you find a technology that has basically been validated in terms of its functionality. And then you can then say, all right, how do I go find an audience that's going to pay for this? Versus some of the classes I teach are what are called 0 to 1 entrepreneurship, which is the riskiest form of entrepreneurship.
That's the Peter Thiel approach.
It's a Peter Thiel approach. Thank you for reminding me.
Yep.
Starting at 0 and having to get to something. It's the highest risk version because there's so much unknown. The more unknowns you have, the more likely you are to fail. The more you can reduce the unknowns, the more likely to succeed. And to be clear, the failure rate in 0 to 1 is about 80 to 95%, depending on a variety of factors.
But if you succeed, you change the world. That's why they do it, right?
You do, right? It's a lot of the really successful companies you've heard about in the news have done 0 to 1, but what we don't hear about are the thousands and thousands that don't.
That's a good point.
But instead, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, like The failure rate for doing entrepreneurship through acquisition is 3%. All right,
That's so interesting.
85% fail rate, 0 to 1. Now, the process that we teach, it's usually 95%, but the processes we teach here, they will increase your chances like 3 times, but you're still 85% fail rate likelihood. Versus entrepreneurship through acquisition is like about a 3% fail rate.
Yeah, and so my finance mind tells me, look, markets are efficient. There must be a reason for the disparity. But what you got to realize is in the entrepreneurship world, markets are not efficient. There are so few people doing it as a percentage that that you can look at it and really get ahead by saying, oh, look, I'm risk averse. I'm going with a 3% failure rate.
Right. And again, entrepreneurship is not about taking lots of risk. It's about managing risk and de-risking things. But back to tech transfer.
Yeah.
You guys have already helped to de-risk a lot because you've already got what's called the feasibility. Can this product be created?
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a technology that people can envision. There's a pain point in the world. What's the solution? Oh, I can imagine it, but I don't know how to make it.
Yeah.
You guys are making all sorts of solutions. So it's like a triangle of what's called desirability. Do people want a solution? Feasibility, can you build it and deliver it? Viability is, can you make money off of it?
Yeah.
And tech transfer basically solves one core area of feasibility. Can it be built?
Well, and also you underestimate how de-risked technologies are from tech transfer. Because so if anyone doesn't know, tech transfer is professors and other employees of BYU invent technologies. That's our job to commercialize them. But professors don't tell us about technologies that failed. Like a professor might create 100 technologies and there's one winner. The winner makes it to our office, and that's what we patent and protect. So you're a little bit like a venture capitalist when you come in looking at those technologies. Mm-hmm. The ones that aren't going to succeed have already been weeded out.
Yeah.
So I generally feel that the technologies we license to people are going to succeed or fail based on the business acumen of the people. We know the technology is good.
That's correct. And similarly, entrepreneurship through acquisition is like a little bit like tech transfer, that the only businesses that succeed are the ones that are still in business. So if you buy an already winning business, well,
same thing.
Unless you really bundle things, it's likely to continue to win. Versus, I'm going to launch a brand new business no one's ever imagined before. It's like the likelihood of failure is really, really high. But if you happen to win, like a Google or a Facebook or a Qualtrics, like it can change the world. It definitely can change your own life considerably. So we basically have the ability and resources to teach at every level of entrepreneurship. That's good. But it's the tech entrepreneurship that most people usually have in mind, like, I'm going to become a tech billionaire. It's like, hey, but there's other problems to solve besides you invented a new textbook, a new Facebook.
Yeah, exactly right. So, well, good. So you alluded earlier to how like policies have changed maybe over time that have made entrepreneurship a little easier at BYU and hopefully elsewhere too. What about, you and I were talking off the record beforehand about academia's shifting view of entrepreneurship. Do you want to touch on that just for a minute?
Yeah. So business schools have been around for about 100 years. And primarily what they teach is how to solve known problems in known contexts. Mm-hmm. So it's like, let's just operate what we know that already works. And so when you get an MBA, you're trained basically how to execute on the already known.
Right. I went to MBA school. It's exactly what it is. Yep.
Entrepreneurship is how to operate in the unknown, which is why the failure rate's higher. Mm-hmm. And so entrepreneurship has had an uneasy alliance with traditional business schools because traditional business schools are like, you guys don't quite fit the model because you guys are operating in the unknowns.
Shouldn't you be dropping out of school? I mean, that's the traditional way of entrepreneurs, right? Yeah.
Right. So academic entrepreneurship has really only become a thing probably in the last 10 or 15 years it's really taken off, but really probably 20 or 30 years it started getting going. And what's happened is in all these positive ways, people understood that we actually can, academics can research how entrepreneurship works and then use those learnings to then package learning experiences to help students avoid the pitfalls that other people have made who didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, and I think I know what you're talking about, but in case people aren't familiar, very concretely, how would that look for a student?
Like
one of those experiences, what might it be?
Well, if I just want to be an entrepreneur and I just get out there and I'm like, I'm trying to sell something, like I don't even have a system or a process for customer discovery and really verify where those customers have a pain point and have any interest in paying for a solution. And if they do they really want my solution? Too often people come up with like, I have a solution, and now suddenly you're the proverbial salesperson. People don't like salespeople.
Yeah.
But instead, if you're a great learner and listener, which we train you to do, Like if you observe enough people and what problems they want to have solved, well, it's really easy. They tell you like, man, I would pay good money to have X, Y, Z solved. Like in one of my classes, I have students, I teach them, I say, what if you went and talked to 15 business owners and asked them, what problem in your business would you spend a lot of money right now to have it solved? And guess what? People will tell you what those problems are. That form of entrepreneurship where you're data-driven, scientific process-driven versus just, I have a lot of emotion and a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
We try, for years, entrepreneurship was just the Wild West. And now it's a disciplined process of being clear about what are your assumptions, how do you test those, and what is the level of data you need to confirm whether you pursue it further, pivot, or abandon the cause and move to a different idea.
Yeah, and you guys do things. So in class, you give them on-the-ground experience like that, and then Rollins Center has like the big idea pitch competition. I mentioned Sandbox. They do a summer program as well. In tech transfer, we did a business plan competition in the fall. We have another one coming up in a couple of weeks. It's kind of a mini competition. So we're trying to give students opportunities to actually do these things, like not just talk about them,
right?
Which I think is so important.
And furthermore, all the things you're talking about, you're having other adults who've been down the road a bit further who are giving feedback. Versus if you're just a solo entrepreneur off campus, not as a student, like where are you going to go get help? Now, there is help. There's chambers of commerce and there's small business resource centers in many communities. These are often paid for by taxpayers. Government realizes new businesses is an engine, right, of growth, but it's just helpful to have it all concentrated in one spot.
Well, and so what you would say, if we weren't talking about a university, you would say, oh, what you're describing is an incubator, someplace where you have office space and all these helps for students to launch startups. I always tell people BYU is an incubator.
That's exactly
right.
Yeah, that's with in some ways way more concentrated resources.
Yeah, and paying, even if you didn't even care about your education, if all you wanted to do was launch a company, I think it's a good idea to come to BYU and pay low tuition and have all these resources and launch a company with tons of support.
Well, in addition to that, it turns out most people who want to be entrepreneurs, a majority of them do not end up being full-time entrepreneurs until a little bit later in life.
Yeah.
And so getting a college degree is helpful because we still have something that's called the paper ceiling. Let's suppose that you want to be an entrepreneur, but for now you have a full-time job that pays the bills, and on the side you're doing a side hustle hoping that you can build it to something bigger. Yeah. The paper ceiling is most jobs in the knowledge working world won't hire you unless you have a degree, like that paper degree. Right. So there's, first of all, education can teach you how to be a better, faster learner. You have a bigger network. So there's all sorts of things you're buying out of.
Well, then anything rigorous you do is beneficial.
Yes.
Okay.
And so if we actually find that a lot of our students end up being successful entrepreneurs maybe a decade or two after the program, because it takes time. Like most of the successful businesses you've seen out there, there's often a 10 or 20 year runway for them to become really well known.
Well, and isn't it the average age of an entrepreneur, the stat, isn't it like between 45 and 50? It's somewhere in that, right?
Yeah, in the 40s and 50s, because they have more life experience and they have a better sense of where the problems are. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be an entrepreneur in your 20s or 30s. It just means that if you learn the processes now for how to be an entrepreneur, you can find yourself in a compelling full-time job that pays the bills while you're doing things on the side and gaining that additional skill set. I will point out, some savvy students will usually figure out some way, partway through the semester, like, hey, wait a second, Dr. Halverson, you are teaching entrepreneurship and you work a desk job.
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah,
I give that. Yeah.
I have a full-time salary job, and it's really nice because I love my job and it gives me stability to go run a bunch of tests. For example, recently, one of the companies I own is a tour business. And I take groups to Israel and the Holy Land, among many other locations. And if you haven't been paying attention to the news, there's been some conflict in Israel that has made it, actually, flights aren't even going there from the United States anymore.
Really? Okay.
So you can't take tour groups. Well, I have been spending tens of thousands of dollars on a variety of techniques to message and market other tours. And it turns out that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And because the travel industry is kind of shrunk in some core areas, well, I need to spend money on other things. Well, it's nice that I have job and access to other income.
Yeah.
My point here is that if you can get yourself a steady flow of income, it can actually lower the risk factor for being an entrepreneur. But back to being a student.
Well, and also, like, many people have side hustles of some type.
Right.
Like, it's a little naive to assume someone's not an entrepreneur because they have a day job. But yeah.
That actually is really important, that you don't need to be an entrepreneur full-time to be an entrepreneur. You don't. And yeah, our point here is that good entrepreneurs de-risk as much as possible.
Yeah.
And being a student means you're at a point where you can be taking on certain levels of risk where the failure factor, the cost of recovery is quite low.
Yeah.
Suppose you try to launch a business or become an entrepreneur while you're a student. What happens if you failed? Well, you could get a bunch of college credit for doing it.
Yeah. Right.
And get a job when you're done.
Right.
And say, yeah, I tried 5 different business ideas and I discovered 5 things that were the wrong product or the wrong timing or the wrong market.
Yeah.
Or it might win.
And, I felt like when I was a student that if you started a startup company or did something like that, it got you off your academic track. Like, I'll never get to law school this way. That's the right thing. And even when I left legal practice, I had attorneys tell me, Dave, like, I'm not sure you want to walk away from this career. I was like, yeah, but you're walking away from things way less now than in the past, I believe. I think people are much more open to you circling around back if you change your mind.
I don't remember what the stats are, but something like by the time people hit age 50, they will have cycled through 4 or 5 careers.
Yeah.
And
I was so skeptical of that when I was a college student, but then here I am,
I felt the same way. You and I have both been involved in 2 or 3 careers while also doing some things on the side.
Yeah.
And part of it is we live in the most tremendous time in all of human history. Despite all the chaos you see on the news, there's never been more opportunity, more resources to have an amazing, interesting life. And
totally true.
Like, we're not all stuck being farmers in the 1500s. Like, you can choose to have a full-time job and have a side gig that becomes like a full-time, full-time job. Like, if you have lots of interests, and a lot of people do, a lot of people love many things, it is possible to enjoy a variety of things versus there's what's the first commandment of higher education? Thou shalt have no other majors before you. Like somehow we tell students, like, you have to specialize in one thing. No, they're strong. Like, you'd have to know what you're doing, but you can't ever enjoy anything else. Let's go into the buffet line and say the only thing you can have here is the potatoes. Don't even touch the gravy.
Well, I think there was the fact that our most accomplished people in all kinds of fields are cross-disciplinary people. People have at least 2 expertises. In my industry, in tech transfer, most people are either an attorney, a business person, or an academic, but actually almost everyone is 2 of those 3.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which 2, there'll
Right.
be 2 of those. And in your case, like your PhD in like more of a humanities, like ancient languages and so on, like that obviously has led you to the business that you run.
Right.
The tour groups. I couldn't do that. I don't speak Arabic very well.
Right. I could teach you the swear words. That gets you around anymore.
I might know them. I know them. So let's narrow it down to top advice for entrepreneurs. Like, for student entrepreneurs, what are 3 things we would want them to know?
Okay. First, you have to be really clear about the process that you use for being an entrepreneur. You can't just like wing it or throw things at the wall. If you follow a disciplined process, you're far more likely to discover what works or what doesn't. It's just like science. Okay. That's first. Second is the courage to take action. So again, you might have a scientific process. If you don't ever run the experiments, it just doesn't matter what you think. Your dreams are damnation, meaning if all you do is sit around dreaming all day long and don't take action, your dreams are useless. So you have to act. You have to be willing to get data to prove that you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the third is to take advantage of all the resources that many, many people have put together to make the university a support for them.
Yeah.
Like, you and I, when we were students, this was an amazing place. There's so many more resources now. The whole point is that some people who have succeeded, like, we want to make it a little bit easier for people to discover what works faster than what we had to deal with. So use a process, take action with courage, and get access to the network, to the resources.
Yeah. And if you were a student thinking for the first time, I want to be an entrepreneur, I would march right on over to the Rollins Center, talk to them about resources. If you think acquiring a technology is the way to go, march on over to the tech transfer office. We'll talk to you, anyone in our office will. And like I say, take advantage of these incubator type resources we have at BYU.
Yeah, it's like voting for Pedro. Make your wildest dreams come true.
That's right, it will. But now you can see how fun it'd be to take class from Taylor. We have great professors here teaching entrepreneurship as well, so really fortunate. Taylor, thanks so much for your time today. That was fantastic.
It's always fun to hang out.
All right, and we'll be back next week with another episode.